Before we get started with the show, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Global Training Center. As trade compliance professionals, you want to make sure that your procedures and documentation are completed as correctly as possible to avoid any delays and possible fines. We provide a range of trade compliance courses that will fit your needs. From in-person or web training to recorded on-demand courses, we can train one or even thousands on your team through your learning platform or on our portal. We can even customize a private session for your team. Go to globaltrainingcenter.com to find out more.
Folks, we're in for SimplyTrade podcast, and we've got a great show coming up today. And with that, I will say that it has been this springtime as we're recording this. Looking forward, there's all kinds of conferences going on and whatnot. You will be able to hear Lalo and I both are suffering from some sinus problems. So I apologize on behalf of both of us right off the bat that if we're coughing and sniffling and all that, it's just because we're trying to work through this. And we've got other conferences coming up. So I'm hoping, Lalo, that I can knock this out in the next day or two. So before I get on a plane and go out, because I know it's not the flu, it's not COVID, it's just sinus problems and different air and all that kind of stuff. So how are you feeling though? You're sounding worse than I am.
No, it's doing okay though. I mean, I sound worse than I actually am. So not a problem. Yeah, but yeah, we're getting ready to go on a trip. So that's going to be fun.
It's just like when it's snorting and coughing and carrying on. I was like, I hope I can get all this stuff dried up. So who knows? With that, folks, we have got a great show today. We're going to talk about some Canadian issues and the import-export scenario there, and in particular, imports into or exports from U.S. into Canada or Canadian imports. And there's some really crazy things going on up in Canada. So, keep in mind, I'm kind of partial to Canada, and in particular for some great Canadian friends. We have a guest that I just love this woman. She is fantastic. We go back a lot of ways, all the way back into the 90s. And Kim Campbell is on. She's former Canadian Customs, and she has a phenomenal consulting business. She's been in the private sector as well after Customs. And so anyway, all said and done, Kim, I want to welcome you to our show. We're going to have some fun today, I think.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be back for a return visit and talk about my favorite four-letter word called Carm.
I also wanna take a moment and also talk about a idea that we talked to and pitched to Kim, and we hope this comes through. But we're gonna make every effort to do this. But we talked to Kim about doing a monthly check-in on Canadian trade, so everything trade. So we're kind of introducing that right now. It's not necessarily the formal version of it, but we hope to. Maybe in a few weeks, a couple of weeks from now, we will have another guest along with Kim to talk a little bit more details, anything that may have changed with regards to Carm. But I just want to make sure that we did say that, because we're hoping to expand our coverage of trade and customs, only because people see Canada as a 51st state, so they just import and export, right? I mean, that's kind of what happens, right? A lot of people think, well, we can just ship it to Canada without thinking, well, it's actually an export.
Absolutely, Lalo. And I think the other really important thing too is a lot of your viewership probably have oversight to the U.S. market. And I know that at conferences, they're always appreciative to have a little track there to kind of give them the insights to help manage that piece of their responsibilities.
Well, with that, we're going to get into the updates on Carm, and then we'll get to talk about our new show that's going to be coming around here that we're looking into. So first off, Carm. What the Sam Hill is Carm?
Okay. So, and I went through this before, and I think Lalo, and I was like, oh, I should write that down. And again, I didn't. So we wanted to know what the acronym was, which I think we said it was CBSA's Assessment and Revenue Management System. So really what it is you guys have a little bit in the U.S. Too as well. Various systems that deal with border clearances and then the accounting parts of the business. A lot, obviously, no ACE, but there still is other things too, like the broker filing systems that run to provide that functionality. So, in a nutshell, originally Carm was supposed to be an upgrade and trying to be a little more in line with some of the requirements around World Customs Organization, revised data sets, because this system is almost 40 years old. So in essence, we are changing our, what we call B3, which the US knows as 7501s, into this new framework. And we're going to be moving on to new technology, including cloud. The new technology is exciting. We've been sitting on this 40-year-old backbone. So that was the crux of how we started this thing. And we started it in 2012. I say it's properly funded in 2018. And we expect it to be implemented by 2021. But here we are, May 2024, after many years and I've actually started in my head to add up the amount of time and energy that I personally put into it. And it's quite mind-boggling. But we will be going off the cliff, as we like to say in Canada, May 13th, 2024, as we go big bang approach and implement this system all at once. So I'll stop with that, Andy. Last time I was on, we did talk about border disruption, massive border disruption that we also expected to occur on May 13th. But I do have some good updates to provide today, based on some current. Our House of Commons has actually recently wanted to ask some questions about Carm, and through some of that dialogue, CBSA has significantly reversed all of their policy decisions that would have caused complete large-scale disruption on May 13th. There's still a lot of issues to dig into here and things that need to be addressed. But I just want to talk about that one specifically because I know, Andy, when we talked about it on the last podcast, we had very big concerns about it, as did, of course, all traders coming in to Canada, including non-residents. That's definitely been a lot of angst within the importing community. So, and really the crux of that was that main big bang, going to be a big problem, was Customs was insisting that every single importer have this portal account in this Carm environment. And if they did not, their goods would have to stop at the border and a hard copy entry would have to be put in to get the goods released and also pay duties and taxes at the border. So again, very grateful that we have this major reversal of fortune. But, it took us 6 years banging our head against the wall and then having to go publicly in front of a House of Commons committee to make that happen. So,
because we have a lot of issues with Carm itself being a new system that has that's driving forward with the way of data flows and entry processing and all that comes into play. But then there's also what's also driving a lot of that is policy. And there was a lot of policy so I think we need to separate these two, as you've talked about it, is that the concept in general, I guess, is on some of these policies, as well as the Carm development to implement those policies, was from a standpoint of trying to force the majority, or if not all, entries supplied by Customs or to Customs for clearance, is that it needs to be in that electronic, digital or automated environment. And if you don't adhere to certain things, they were by policy going to say you have to now go through the hard copy 18th century process of submitting a hard copy paper for clearance and do it at the border, which in the midst of that would be like a truck coming across the border, which a lot of commerce is moved via trucks, even rail, whatever. And you may have a few shipments in there that don't comply with the way this is going, and it would hold up all the rest of the other shipments because those would have to be pulled out by the carrier and then processed. If I got
Yeah, you do have it right. And that doesn't mean it still won't happen down the road. We got some new, again, lots of new policy decisions that give us some flexibility, but only up to a year. So we'll continue to pursue that. But yeah, on a truck position, and again, it depends, the complication of trade depends if the carrier is bonded or not. For those that aren't bonded, they wouldn't be able to move forward until it was all done. For those that are bonded, they would be able to move inland, but all those goods would then start to pile up in warehouses. And just so you know, like Canada 20 years ago basically decided we're going to get rid of a lot of warehouses because everything's cleared at the borders. So, again, another one we've been saying, okay, if you're going to do that from a policy position, and yeah, you're right, it can go into the warehouses, but based on this trajectory, we'll probably have full warehouses within 48 hours. And then what? So that's why, again, just from a common sense perspective, it just never made any sense. But to get so close to go live and then only have reversal on that policy decision only because obviously there was some oversight in a public forum, we are grateful, but that just gives you an indication of the challenges that we're still facing.
With that, it seems like, and folks, this is being very critical of some of the folks in the bureaucratic side of things, the agency side, that are developing, I guess, the processes and the procedures in this. That, quite frankly, it seems like either you have people that are somewhat naive. In other words, they may have come through school, gotten their degrees, they've gone straight into government, they're coming up with these procedures and have never been in the business environment and don't really look to see what the negative impact is here or accommodating and listening to it. Or you've got some folks that may be seasoned coming up with this. They're trying to drive their own agenda on, we're really going to, this is the way it's got to be. And again, not paying attention to what it would do from a business perspective, as well as the negative effects on the commerce and the flow. Is that pretty?
I can't disagree with the thing you said. The other thing I would also layer in a little bit is this is an interesting, case study is the word. I'd hate to say it is, but it kind of is, because the government is actually outsourcing this whole solution. So that has been another part of the journey, which is it's going to be outsourced to a third party. So effective May 13th, when we cut over, it will go on to this third party's cloud farm that they will be managing outside of the government structure. Obviously, there's less concerns and things that we will continue to pursue. Industry certainly has raised it from day one. We're very interested to see and continue that discussion because for anyone that follows Canadian border issues and interest in what's going on, you might have heard of ArriveCan. This is the application that was developed during COVID by CBSA in partnership with a couple of other agencies. But we recently had an Auditor General report on this project, and we see a lot of the similar behavior of what we're seeing with the ArriveCan situation. And again, it was third-party vendors involved, overcost, overrun projects, again, delivered by the same team that is delivering Carm. So hopefully we will get somebody to lean in and help industry. But I kind of, Andy, what you described is even reflected a little bit in some of the Auditor General's report.
Okay. So what would be the scenario now that as people are getting through, we've kind of touched on a lot of things. So folks, let's back up a minute, is that there's been some policy changes and whatnot. So if you're listening to this, there's been some detrimental policies that had been put forward, system development side from the Canadian government, more specifically Canadian Customs and Border Protection, CBSA, I guess. With that, in looking at this, it has been then reversed. Those policies have been stopped or at least neutralized for at least a year, as you mentioned. And if they're looking at it, it's like, so, what do we do about it? What needs to happen here? And it sounds to me like the private sector, more than just service providers, I'm talking actual companies, importers, companies doing international business. So you may import bulk and then export it back out in a pick and pack scenario and distribution and all that. That's great, whether you're doing it Canadian domestic or shipping it back out to other countries. It sounds like those companies need to get involved in this to have their input and influence put towards those that have been involved from the Canadian government side of the House?
Yeah, we would highly recommend that. We are having this committee next week. The committee certainly has requested any kind of feedback from the private sector. Obviously, a lot of trade associations have been working on behalf of our members who are the constituents that you named, Andy. But for sure, we would strongly encourage anyone to reach out to IE Canada specifically, because that's usually my not-for-profit handle, and we can help facilitate that. But you could certainly send them in to the committee, also to any elected official. Easy to find their information online, whoever the federal elected official is in anyone's jurisdiction. It would be fantastic if you could send in comments to them now. We're kind of full court press here, and we'll talk about some of the reasons we're still for full court press in a second. But again, a lot of associations have even suggested wording. IE Canada will be putting ours out publicly on our website through LinkedIn on Tuesday around the time that CBSA themselves are testifying. And we're encouraging people, if those resonate to you, you could even just put in, say you support that. And for a lot of members or your viewership here, they would be customs brokers. Certainly, the customs brokers have a lot of statements they've made. You could certainly support that. I can tell you through my other volunteer work that the 3 brokers associations I should say 4 in total, 2 in Canada, and the NCBFA and Carm have just put out a statement on this. So that one is something we could get out as well. And if people just want to support it, that would be great. Again, Andy, to your point, talking about exporting and importing, we feel this topic is big enough that these 4 associations have come together to make a statement on behalf of trade. So definitely lots of time, and the perfect time to do it now because May 13th is fast approaching. And we can certainly talk a little bit about the cutover as well, because I think a lot of people are trying to figure out, what do I need to do day one, if anything, because I hear all these mixed messages. And this, Lalo, is maybe a little bit of tease for the next one we will do sooner than later, because we are still waiting for some of that last minute transition instruction. Can you imagine, as not only an importer, but service providers having to have a big bang May 13th, and we don't even have final written implementing instructions? Like, it's kind of crazy. And I can tell you, we're getting, if you're in a call one day, happen to be on one call, you might hear something that nobody else knows and they haven't told everyone. For example, we've been waiting for many months to know what the cutover period is. So what that means is we're going to be, that whole Carm system that exists today, and many people are on it, will be going down for a number of weeks as we transition over. Have you ever heard of anything like this, where a company goes down for weeks and you can't transact business? But that's what we're going to be doing. So again, official announcement hasn't come out, but I personally have heard it on one of these calls that they have finally decided on April 26th, this will be the cutover period. This means, again, nobody will be able to access the portal. So for, that few weeks, as people hear about the portal, the importing, they start to go, hey, gosh, I better get on the portal. They will go and try and sign on. And guess what? It's down until May 13th. Okay. So best case scenario, that's assuming it comes up. And then the other thing to know is, during this period of time, we will not be able to transmit any B3s, which are the 7501s. So could you imagine if U.S. Customs went down for a 3-week period and said, listen, you got to sit on these entries. You're going to not be able to transmit them for 3 weeks. Well, the day it comes up, that's fine. You can try and send in the ones that you had, but they have to be in this whole new format.
It's going to take days, if not a couple of weeks, to get that backlog of 3 weeks worth, plus all the normal transactions going on. But here's something that I would see that I don't think those involved are understanding. A 3-week delay, and it sounds like you would be able to continue to get releases on cargo, but you would not confirm it. And the confirmation of the entry, hence the B3 on that, is not only the confirmation of the entry, but then it would say, okay, these are the duties and taxes assessed, so that there's going to be a 3-week hit on the cash flow to the Canadian government. So in that realm, in all that, it's like, that's going to be significant
Yes. So that's
and I don't think they have really realizing what's going on, even on the Canadian government side.
Yeah. Well, I feel they might realize what's going on. They just don't seem to be able to do anything else. So then we could only surmise why not. But they're very aware that that's going to happen. You're 100% right. And even on May 13th, they've told us, the service providers, that they're going to triage. So we could expect another 5 to 6 days of having to slowly send in the backlog. For the reasons you just talked about, because we don't know how it's going to perform really. And then that would be one of my recommendations to importers, Andy, as you've said, take a look at your receivables, and you might have to accrue money during that period. The payment processes are changing. The statement of accounts are changing. The other big, huge change, which is causing a lot of confusion, is right now customs brokers can mostly pay on behalf of importers. Luckily, customs did change their mind about that many years ago, so that service is still available. But because of the way it is set up, it really has to be an important conversation that an importer has with their customs broker. They cannot assume that the customs broker would be paying as they are today without that conversation. And so that's a really important thing to know too, because now customs brokers are not responsible. And just because of the holistic changes, they won't even have a lot of visibility and understanding of what's even owed in an easy way.
All right. So to that extent, what should be happening now? You said there's a committee meeting that's, did you say at the next week?
Yes, it's May 21st. We have 2 hours with some excellent industry leaders.
Wait, May or March?
I'm sorry. Thank you, Andy. March 21st. It's all gets to be a big blur after a while.
Yeah, I get it. No, I was just going to say, if you're wanting involvement, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. We're doing next week.
Too late. Yes. So just to go over too, like one of the things, as we're talking about, that's great. We've had some policy changes. There's so much work still to do. I can tell you just as a little preview, all of the representatives will be talking about our concern on Big Bang. We really have never understood it. We've never had a good explanation as to why it was necessary. We've never seen it on any of our systems implementations historically. We've had great help from NCBFA to explain, the parallel stand-up of ACE. And I know, having testified just a few weeks, or I shouldn't say testify, presented at committee, many of the people around the table were also equally concerned and surprised we were doing Big Bang. So we definitely will be asking for some relief on that. But we just don't think it's viable for so many different reasons. Way too risky. And the other thing, Andy, you bring up, although we say that, it's not going to implement our release systems, we're seeing information that it's showing it could be going down for 10 hours over the weekend. But again, because we don't have a transition plan, we're not really sure. I can tell you a lot of the systems are integrated now. So our concern is obviously as they start to unbundle and reposition this, logic only tells you you're going to have hiccups and outages and all those things that could be significantly mitigated if we don't have Big Bang. The other thing to know as well, shockingly, is, Customs has been telling us consistently for many, many years until a few weeks ago that there's 200,000 importers. We have been trying to test with them since 2021, but they've really limited the amount of participants. The last round, which we call CES 2.0, only 40 people were allowed to participate. Companies, entities were allowed to participate. The initial one, we've had 3 again. The one before that, they allowed in 75, but then told us, that was too much to handle. So we have to scale it back to 40. To which was very interesting to us because we thought, well, if you can't handle 75, got to go to 40, how are you possibly going to handle 200,000 on May 13th? But more importantly, other than those 40, the rest of us have not seen the system. So on May 13th, just under 200,000 entities are going to be trying to figure out how this thing works.
I don't know if this is going to be silly or not, but what are the odds or the chances that this rollout could be a lot like the Y2K thing? Like, remember Y2K? Everybody was so scared that everything was going to shut down and all systems were going to...
Yeah.
And nothing happened. It was a nothing burger, as they say.
Yeah. You know what, Lalo? I hope that's what happens, quite honestly. Like, my personal advocacy is because I don't want my border disrupted and I don't want my economy to be impacted, which would happen if it doesn't work quite that well. I really hope I'm wrong. I 100% do. I would happily buy a lot of people drinks if I'm wrong. But we just know so much already. Even if we assume the system is going to work, which we have seen not too much evidence that it will. Even the testing has proven to be, lots of things have proven not to be working or not functioning the way either the technical document has stated or we understood it to be. And we continuously just keep getting customers. Now, they've been saying the same thing for 3 years. You have to understand, every time we've raised these issues and we just keep seeing them reoccur, they continue to say, no, all of it's going to be fixed May 13th. Okay, nobody's retested it. So this is one of the things that we talk about is the pattern of behavior, because we saw this exact same behavior called out recently in this ArriveCan application, where customs would do systems changes and not retest. And then there was obviously significant consequences. So again, I hope I'm wrong. I hope we're all wrong. But some fundamental things just aren't working. And in addition to that, some fundamental things that we do today, we're still waiting from customs to tell us how it's going to work, because it's not working in the current solution. And that includes being able to actually give them money for the duties and taxes we owe. So that's always a little bit scary too. And again, fundamental changes, like another big one I would point out to importers as well, which I'm certainly suggesting and know my colleagues are. One of the biggest changes is customs is now doing the calculations on duties and taxes. They've never, ever done this before. We're not aware of any country in the world doing this. So we will send in the tombstone data like you normally would, only we're not going to be saying, oh, here's how much duties or tax. Customs takes that data and they make the calculation and it shows up on the statement of account. So based on 3 iterations of testing, the testers have all reported that there's been calculation issues on various things. So some of them get rectified after weeks. Some still we're trying to figure it out. Customs keeps saying it's us not interpreting policy. But again, we've been doing this for 30 years. We just kind of followed some of the basics that we've already known. Apparently they completely changed, but nobody told us. And so those things are to be considered. And so from an importer's perspective, we would strongly recommend that you get the report from customs, because the other hilarious part of the story, not hilarious, I say tongue in cheek, is you will be able to go into your statement account and get like kind of the tombstone data by the transaction level in terms of, here's the duties and taxes, but you won't get it on the invoice detail line level. So you won't know if they've calculated correct or not. You'll have to cross-check with your customs broker system. The only way you can get those reports is you have to request it through the Carm client portal. And, like you go into the bank and you request stuff and it just comes down in a CSV file. It goes into a work queue in this case, and it's a 3-week turnaround time. So you're going to be pushed in a position in a lot of cases where you're going to have to potentially pay duties and taxes without being able to do your cross-checking to know if it's even correct in the first place.
Okay, so all said and done, this looks like a proverbial train wreck that just continue on down the tracks here or something. It's just, it's sounds
the gift
like
that keeps on giving.
I'm telling you. Well, it's like, and it's one of those that you don't want, right? All right. So as we're going through this, again, I'm saying, all right. So the committee and what committee are you talking about next week? That's meeting?
It's the House of Commons Standing Committee on International Trade Studies.
Okay.
If you go onto the House of Commons,
who's on that?
It's a number of elected officials. So it would, again, in Canada, we have 4 parties. So there is, and it depends on their number of seats in Parliament, how many are assigned. So right now, because our Liberal government is the ruling party, they have the most seats, and then it's actually a good mix, to be honest, because we have what's called a not majority government. So all 4 parties are represented on the committee. And if anyone's interested, I did do a testimony on February 1st. All my I shouldn't say, keep saying testimony. I'm ready at some point, though, to swear in the Bible and give my testimony. But in this case, no, I'm a witness at the committee. And you can go in, they're all recorded. They're actually televised live, but then they're all recorded. So that stuff's there and people can see it. And I was very pleased with the questions I got, and the committee members were very gracious, all members of the committee, and was very thankful that they also felt what I was saying. And of course, some of my supply chain colleagues validated why we could not have border disruption. They decided to take up this study on Carm.
Okay. So with this, they're meeting. Where are they meeting? Are they meeting in Ottawa, or you mentioned it before? And again, my memory is as long as a turtle's tail here.
No, so you're right. So in Canada, our parliament is in Ottawa, and we will be meeting with the committee there, just off Parliament Hill in one of their committee meeting rooms. And Andy, like, we have a really, really good group of people on there. You actually, if you want, you can go and see who my fellow witnesses are. And we have a really great group of women. I was the only woman on the last committee, so I'm happy to say not only am I dealing with some amazing industry colleagues, but they happen to all be women. So, and one of them is your good friend, Renata Jambert. So,
oh, I love Renata. What a great lady. Hey, listen, if she's on there, I'm telling you, she'll forget more than most people will learn. So that is fantastic there. So, okay, great. So as they're coming together though, in all, what is it is this something that is going to be televised, or do you need to be there in person?
No, it's televised. It's actually live. And if you miss it, you can just be on the website. They pretty much release it at the same time. So it's almost there immediately, that people can get on. For folks that, get on LinkedIn and a lot of people know the infamous Al Dewar is a very famous Canadian LinkedIn content person. I say that with tongue in cheek, but Al's a very good friend. And Al should be actually hopefully joining me on our next one. We talk a little more about some of the updates around Carm. But Al has actually, and others have too, but Al's done probably the most work just to pull out snippets of the testimony. So you can go and pull some of the snippets if you don't want the 2-hour popcorn version of the conversation.
Well, and I guess in looking at it, who should be the folks that would be normally involved in something like this? I mean, you would have senior executives of companies. I understand they're getting yanked 6 ways from Sunday. Is this something that they need to be involved in, or is this something that they should delegate down to maybe their regulatory and industry affairs type folks, logistics areas, purchasing, actually sourcing would be a key one, transportation, whatever, warehouse distribution, all that kind of scenario, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, again, a lot has changed since we last talked, Andy. Like on February 8th, I think is when I should remember this. February 14th was the complete reversal of the border blow up scenario. So before that, though, we had been advising, like you just said, please, like, plan. And like Lalo said, like, we really don't want it to happen. So it's always like, plan for the worst, hope for the best. And a lot of the people that we did suggest would be all that, the supply chain, making sure people knew, we were suggesting make sure you're on the Carm client portal, because at that time we thought it was going to be mandatory. We still probably would advise, though, because we just don't know how stable the system conversion is going to be, that if you have critical items that you need in Canada, whether it's order fulfillments with customers or critical parts if you're doing manufacturing, it would be super wise to get them in really before the cutover. Like, I would suggest try and get them in by April, because we know for sure this blackout is April 26th. And in my head, a lot of bets are off at that point.
Well, to that point, all right, so let's talk to our listeners here, is that the impact of what Kim is saying here with this conversion over to Carm and the systems and the processes. Yes, there's been a holdup on some policies. Other things are moving forward. So this cutover, you need to look to see what would happen to your supply chain and to your customers and things, that if there is a negative effect on your supply chain for 3 weeks due to this scenario, and actually maybe longer, because even after the system comes up, it's like there's going to be issues coming back up and whatnot. So could you handle your own customer orders, your customer service departments responding to your clients that now the supply chain is disrupted potentially in this? Now, supposedly cargo's coming in, it would be able to be released in theory.
That this is the big net new change. Yes, this is a big net new change. Like, up until 14th, we were like told, no, everything's going to park if you didn't have a portal account. So this is a bet new change, which should really not make, that should not happen. It just should not. The only thing that, Andy, to your pointing out, is as we do the conversion, like, will the release systems be impacted? They, in theory, they shouldn't be completely, but we know there is integration between the two. We also know that, some of the main edits that were going to be in there to stop release are going to have to be changed. And based on what we've seen so far, that's not always has been a smooth thing in the last, 6 years dealing with this project. So it's something I would say, like, we're kind of, we have repositioned our advice out to our own importers through the IE Canada, my not-for-profit group. I just kind of said, hey, good news. We don't expect large-scale border disruption as we advised, but we still want you to consider, like you just said, Andy, but plan for a whole bunch of confusion through the back-end parts around payments. Are the duties and taxes being calculated? Can you get onto these systems? And that's where I agree with you. The best advice would be, this is really the regulatory and, customs professionals and organizations that would probably be managing and trying to figure that piece out. The payment process, in my mind, is one that they should really, really focus on sooner than later, because they're probably relying on their customs broker to do all that. And, I know customs brokers. I'm a customs broker myself. I know that most of them or all of them have been working hard to get to customers to try and figure that out. But when it's all at once, every single buddy all at once, like if we're not already got it going, that's going to be a lot of also some mad scrambling as we're trying to figure this out over the many next few weeks. So one of the things I like to say is, like, let's have grace with each other and be forgiving to your customs broker, because they're just been really put in a very, very bad position. And the other thing too is, like, even when I can't even believe still, if you go onto the CBSA website and try and find out all this information we're talking about, including the playbooks, and there is a lot of good information, it is not there. You have to go on this Google Drive that only a few of us that know that exists to find any of this information out. So, probably, I don't know if you guys, I think you do some like supplemental stuff with a PDF or something like Lalo. I might maybe be smart just to do a one pager that we could give out with the podcast, where we can give people those sites so they can go and find that stuff.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. There's no problem.
They never in a million years will be able to find it. Yeah, I have one. I got one ready to go, so I can send it right away.
Yeah, check the show notes so that you can see the link behind that and where you can grab that information. No problem.
Okay, perfect. So there's a little, added bonus for listening to SimplyTrade, because hardly anyone knows it exists.
Well, with that, I'm going to say, let's talk about, we are looking at developing, or are planning on developing, a new show that's dedicated specifically to Canadian issues, Canadian international trade issues in particular. And with that, we can talk, there's, obviously there's a huge amount of cross-border, both directions, between the Canada and the U.S. There are, as we just mentioned, the Carm issues. There are cargo security issues. The forced labor prevention. Canada has passed.
We talked about that recently. Yep.
Yeah. And so there's somebody, what's the impact, if you will, of what Canada is expecting, as well as then, the relationship between U.S. and Canada, as well as Mexico. You got the Canadian, Mexico, U.S. agreements. So with that, there's all kinds of things that we're going to be able to get into the minutia on. And I will say that I'm looking forward to interviewing several different folks. You and I are going to be joining forces, I guess, on coming up with some folks to interview. Yes. So this is a big announcement as we're going through. We need people to please share and subscribe to SimplyTrade with all of any and all of your Canadian friends, if you will. In particular, and anybody that's, even in the U.S. that's in particular has oversight of Canadian issues and supply chains and those kinds of things. But What do you think, Kim? What do you think we're going to get to do? I think it's going to be fun.
I am so excited about this, and we don't have anything in the Canadian market. So, again, so excited to have this opportunity to start this fun venture with you guys. Look forward to bringing a lot of my Canadian friends or even my US friends that we talk about things and say, hey, it'd be great to have a good conversation, talk about things bilaterally or trilaterally in some cases would be great too. But yeah, and I'm sure there's lots of topics out there that people want to hear about from a Canadian perspective. And I think it'll be great that we can offer them some advice and some insights.
Mm-hmm. I love it. It's just with that, folks, if you are interested from a company perspective, from a trade association perspective and all of that, hopefully, again, you will be subscribing. If you're looking at wanting to be sponsors with us and all of that, please reach out to us and guarantee you we'll be doing some advertising and moving this across our show. I got to tell you, Kim, Lalo and I are so humbled that, we started this out mainly just to talk about issues that, coming out of COVID and keep things going. And apparently we've hit a bit of a niche where the import-export compliance folks, the supply chain folks and transportation seem to like what we're hitting here. And we're gaining in popularity. There's no question about that. But again, folks like yourself, oh my gosh, you're just so fantastic. And hopefully our Canadian side of the border will, embrace us on this show.
I'm sure they will. And God knows I will call them all to subscribe. So
there you go.
But also I want to say congratulations to you and Lalo. Like, again, passionate folks in our industry that has brought together this amazing podcast and the opportunity to talk about things and share really complicated subjects with each other. You really need to be commended. And I know a lot of us really appreciate your efforts and are very happy to see your success.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And with that, folks, really, you need to be involved. Whether you're on the Canadian side or U.S. side, you need to be involved to see what's going on, because it's going to, if your company is doing business into and out of Canada, whether it's in the U.S., other countries, you need to really make a point to get involved, watch what's going on, look to see what's being discussed. And then, number 2, follow up with, if you're for or against a particular issue, and supply some information, send letters, send emails, make phone calls to some of these representatives, excuse me, and so that your voice can be heard. And 3, get involved. And if you have interest and not sure where to go, you can reach out to Lalo or myself, and we'll forward your information over to Kim. Kim's information is going to be in part of the show notes, but we'll get you to some of the right parties on how you can plug into this and see what we need to do. All of that, Kim, thank you so much for being on our show. It's always a pleasure getting to see you and talk to you and being around. Listen, folks, Kim Campbell is one of those you just love to be around. She is so smart. She will guide you in the right way, but also it's just, you're so knowledgeable on these topics. So thank you for being.
Thank you. Thank you both for allowing me the privilege to be on your amazing podcast. I look forward to the SimplyTrade Day.
There you go. With that, folks, we're going to turn it back over. Hope you have a great day. Please like us, share us. Thank you so much for what you're doing. We're growing in popularity. We need more of that kind of support to continue on as we hit new milestones with the show. With that, have a great day.
Thank you very much for joining us. SimplyTrade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show, or would like to sponsor SimplyTrade, or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com or you can DM us on Twitter at SimplyTradePod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. SimplyTrade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by SimplyTrade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.